Susan is the girl Eric, my boyfriend, saved from a fire. On our wedding day, Eric got a call and told me he needed to rush out, because Susan was feeling insecure. I was holding back tears, begging him to come back. But Eric just sent me an impatient voice message. Why are you being so difficult? She just got out of a dangerous situation. This wasn't the first time Eric left me for Susan. I called off the wedding and left with my luggage, feeling disappointed. Later, when I was kissing Ken, Eric regretted it. He was desperate for me to come back. Today is supposed to be my wedding day with Eric. I was so nervous I couldn't sleep all night. After dating for 5 years, we were finally getting married. Eric had his arm around me while we toasted, and after a while, he helped me back to the room. Soon, we'd be making our speeches, but suddenly Eric let go of my hand to answer a call by the window. I watched as he smiled unconsciously, and it made me feel a pang of jealousy. After the call, Eric quickly removed the boutonniere and untied his tie. I have something to do. Let's postpone the wedding. Eric, I called out to him with tears in my eyes. Eric just frowned, tossing his suit jacket onto the table. Susan's crying again. I need to be with her. She's insecure, you know. And with that, Eric hurried out, leaving me alone in the lounge. I clutched my white wedding dress, stunned. Susan was the girl Eric saved from a fire a month ago. Back then, he hadn't quit his job yet, and that was his last rescue mission. I remember seeing him carrying the delicate girl in his arms, filled with admiration and compassion. But later, Eric kept receiving calls from Susan whenever we were together. Her trembling voice carried sobs. Eric, I have nightmares again. I'm so scared. Eric would send me home and rush to be with her. I questioned him about it, but he just reassured me. I saved Susan from the fire. It's normal to bear some responsibility. She leans on me, but it's temporary. Once she gets better, I won't be seeing her anymore. I didn't want to let go of our 5-year relationship, and the bond we built from college to working life. So I endured it again and again. But this time, Eric left me on our wedding day to rush to Susan. I was really hurt, and I was nearly giving up. I called him, choking on my words, over and over. Eric didn't answer. Much later, he sent me a voice message, sounding frustrated. Why are you being so unreasonable? She just got out of a dangerous situation. It's been almost a month. How come she hasn't found a doctor if she's that distressed? I couldn't understand. Just like I couldn't understand why my boyfriend kept indulging her. After staying silent for a long time, I finally sent him a hoarse voice message. Let's break up. Eric still didn't respond. Pushing down my heartache, I went to announce the wedding was off. Eric's parents looked embarrassed, but I couldn't worry about them. My mom, Emma, came to ask me what happened, and I told her everything, asking them to handle Eric's parents. From the lounge, I overheard Eric's mom arguing with him over the phone. Break up if you want, but you don't have to baby Lucy. Mom and Dad, stop. I have things to do, bye. The wedding ended in failure, and looking at the bewildered faces of departing guests, I hid my face in embarrassment. Tears dripped through my fingers onto the floor. After a long time, I wiped my tears and returned to the apartment I shared with Eric. We rented this place as soon as we graduated. Every corner, the sofa, bookshelf, bed, we decorated them together. We were supposed to move into our marital home after the wedding. Thinking about how I was dreaming of our married life just last night made me feel foolish. Calmly, I packed all my things in the apartment and left. I went back to work. I had taken time off for the wedding, but it was no longer needed. When my colleagues gossiped, I casually announced my breakup with Eric, though my heart still ached. I put on a brave face. Eric didn't call or send any apologies all day. Maybe I'm the only one still clinging onto this relationship. Eric's heart wasn't with me since he carried Susan out of that fire. After work, I got a call from Sue. Lucy, have you decided about what I told you? Sue had offered me a job opportunity in the neighboring city a month ago, but I thought Eric's free time was limited, and I wanted to be there whenever he was. Now, that wasn't a concern. I agreed with Sue. I had a month of work to wrap up, and after work, I saw Eric's car. He pulled me inside. Lucy, stop throwing a tantrum. Susan's just a girl. Her mental health is in bad shape. That's why she needs me. Why did you cancel the wedding impulsively? How can it be a wedding with just one person? Eric, Susan is 24. She's not a naive child. Can't her parents or friends help her instead of always turning to someone else's boyfriend? Lucy, she's not like that. Watching Eric get mad over Susan made me feel dazed. I couldn't stop thinking about the 19-year-old Eric who climbed over the wall for me. Eric who worried about my interviews even with a fever. The Eric who cherished me. We've argued before, but it was never like this. Eric's heart belongs to someone else. I'm painfully aware of that. I've seen what it's like when Eric loves me, so I can't fool myself anymore. Fine, she's great. I only came to tell you we're broken up. The wedding is off, and I have no issue with whoever you're with. Breaking free from Eric's grip, I turned to leave, my eyes stinging. I held back my tears, not wanting Eric to see. Eric lit a cigarette behind me, something he only did when stressed. I didn't know if Eric was stressed about me or someone else. Not until I reached the subway did I wipe my tears away. Dinner at my friend Sue's house wasn't just with her alone. There were 2 guys cooking in the kitchen. I looked at Sue, and she shot me a mischievous smile. You just broke up. I found you a man. The guys were already there, so I couldn't just leave. Sue introduced one as her new boyfriend, Larry. When she asked why Eric and I broke up, I told her about Susan. Sue was mad and wanted to make trouble, but I stopped her. We're broken up. I don't want to see Eric again. Sue pulled me towards the kitchen. The guy who came out was wearing a face mask, but I could tell he had a great build. Are male models this high quality now? The masked guy chuckled and sat beside me. I stared at his handsome eyes, thinking he looked familiar. Sue brought over a dozen bottles of wine and gave them a little pat. Lucy, don't be upset over him, come on. I took the wine, drank a couple of sips, and nearly choked. Then this long-fingered hand handed me a tissue. Thanks. Up close, he seemed familiar, and I instinctively reached for his mask. But he caught my wrist. If you look, you gotta take responsibility. Sue was already tipsy, talking with her boyfriend. When the guy burst out laughing, I quickly pulled off his mask, looking at him drunkenly. Ken, I found you, huh? Ken squinted his eyes at me, got up, and made me a cup of honey water. Here, drink a bit. When he handed the straw to me, I accidentally brushed against his fingers. When you're buzzed, your senses get heightened, and your mind starts racing. Ken, why are you here? Came to check out future colleagues. I glanced at drunken Sue and Larry. Then Ken patted my head and turned me back around. It's you, Lucy. Sue said you'd agreed to join our team, so I thought I'd drop by. I avoided his gaze. Hi there, new colleague. Ken was the one who took me home that night. Downstairs, I saw Eric, and next to him was Susan. I didn't get why they were both there. Should I step in? Ken asked. I shook my head and got out of the car alone. Eric saw me and rushed over, gripping my hand tightly, eyes low. Who is he? I ignored Eric and instead looked at Susan. She was skinny. When Eric wasn't looking, she gave me this smug smile. When Eric turned back around, Susan stepped back with teary eyes and grabbed his sleeve. Speak, Lucy, who is he? It's none of your business. My cold attitude seemed to piss off Eric. He frantically grabbed his hair. I waited for you all afternoon. Why didn't you pick up my calls? Then it hit me. I had blocked him. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. Lucy, why won't you listen to my side? I looked at him with a bit of amusement. Even now, Susan was holding onto his sleeve. All right, then explain. What's up with you and Susan? Eric blurted out. She's just a friend, Lucy. You know, she doesn't feel secure. Didn't you always tell me to be empathetic? I couldn't listen anymore, so I slapped him hard in the face. He looked at me, stunned. I lost the desire to explain further, turned to head home, but Eric hugged me from behind. Lucy, I was wrong. I felt a headache coming on. Eric didn't get what he did wrong. He was just saying this cause I was leaving. Did you ever think about whether I felt secure? You left so many times for Susan and never thought about my feelings. Susan cried as she spoke. I really didn't mean anything. I couldn't stand it anymore. I pushed Eric away and slapped Susan too. Susan looked shocked. I looked at Eric and said, she's 24. Use your head. If you can't figure it out, don't bother coming to me. Wish you both happiness. I pushed past them and went upstairs. I could still faintly hear Susan talking to Eric, crying. I declined Eric's friend request, got under my blanket, and curled up. Eric was still wearing our wedding ring, reminding me, so I tucked my ring into the drawer. I didn't reply to Ken's message yet, still unsure how to face him. Today was a chance encounter, but adults are usually quick to pick up on these vibes. Could Ken still have a crush on me? In my books, Ken once subtly confessed. At that time, I was already with Eric, so I acted like I didn't see it. It took me a while to close my eyes, decided to go with the flow. A week later, my company assigned me a new intern. She's sharp. I'll probably leave in 2 weeks. Seeing Ken after work reminded me, he said he'd take me to dinner. Lucy, let's go. Just as I was about to get in his car, Eric burst out from the side. He grabbed my wrist, sounding both urgent and angry. Lucy, who is he? I deleted Susan. I'm really over it. Lucy, let's go home. Watching him desperately, I frowned and pried his hand off. Ken stood on the side, slightly amused. I grabbed his arm and shook it. Sorry, Eric, I have a boyfriend. Eric's face twisted with emotion. Impossible, Lucy. don't lie to me. I bought back everything you took. The apartment's just like before. Can you come back and see? I knew it wasn't like Eric to suddenly be over Susan. Something must have happened. Avoiding him, I tried to leave with Ken, but Eric blocked Ken's way. I noticed the tensed muscles under Eric's shirt, and instinctively looked at Ken. Ken tapped my forehead, infuriating Eric even more. He seemed ready to fight Ken, and I couldn't let that happen. I used Ken as a shield, not to give him trouble. In front of Eric, I kissed Ken on the cheek, smiling. Let's go, time for dinner. Eric didn't stop us, repressing his anger while watching me get in Ken's car. Was I helpful? I nodded instinctively. Ken smirked and took me for hot pot. After getting home, I did some digging and found out Susan was indeed pregnant. Eric's sudden change of heart wasn't from realizing his mistakes, but from Susan's pregnancy. Eric doesn't like kids, even to the point of being adverse. When we dated, he was clear about this, and since I didn't want kids, it worked for us. Now with Susan expecting, it was clear Eric wanted to reconcile out of fear of responsibility for the kid. He was using me as a shield. Eric genuinely loved me, and he loved Susan too. Before me, Eric's ideal type was always someone gentle and soft-spoken. Susan fits that perfectly. I once thought our path to marriage was set, and no ideal could make Eric give up 5 years with me. I trusted Eric, but he hit me with a hard reality check. Thinking back, it was probably when Eric ditched me at the aquarium to pick Susan up at the bar. The thought made me sick. I can picture Susan's words to him. This was an accident. I don't want you to take responsibility. Sorry. Eric wouldn't yell at someone he just got closer to. I know Eric well. He's a bit of a traditional guy, but is sweet and loyal like a puppy when he loves someone. He's genuinely big on emotions, but maybe we were together too long, and my presence became routine for him. Susan's arrival was like a stone disrupting the water. I wasn't surprised at all that Eric came looking for me. 5 years of a relationship doesn't just disappear overnight. Sure, I think about Eric sometimes too, but unlike him, I don't love him anymore. Ken invited me out for a picnic over the weekend, and I said yes. Seeing him in casual clothes made him look much younger compared to his usual business attire. When I saw the fishing rods in his trunk, I felt a little itch. Wanna compete? I nodded, remembering our college days, particularly a group project that coincidentally involved fishing rods. Ken, don't you need to work in New York City? I asked. Your big sister Mary thought I'd run off, so she told me to keep an eye on you, he joked, eyes on the pond. Suddenly, the fishing rod wobbled, a big one, it's heavy. Ken stood behind me, using his strength to help reel it in. I fell back into his arms, where he instinctively caught me and then quickly let go. Dinner tonight? He asked. Sure. Ken handed off the fish to the staff to take care of, and we went to wash our hands. My phone kept buzzing non-stop, so I blocked Eric's new number as well. We spent the night at the picnic spot, the awkwardness melting away, as if we were back to our college days. The next day at the office, the receptionist awkwardly called to say there was a commotion downstairs. It was Susan. Her eyes were red as she cried in her white dress. It was lunchtime, and my co-workers were sneaking peeks from behind me. Susan accused me tearfully. Sister, I'm pregnant with Eric's child. Can you stop bothering him? You guys have already broken up. I want a home with Eric. Please let him go. Had I not been involved, I'd think I was the one breaking up someone else's relationship. My colleagues knew Eric and I were about to get married, but broke up. Seeing Susan, they had expressions of realization. Is she the one who got between Lucy and her guy? Heard her ex saved Lucy. Isn't that ungrateful? How shameless. I walked up to Susan and smiled. Susan, you really have no shame, do you? Her face turned pale, silent except for her sobbing. This tactic might work on Eric, but not on me. I wasn't going to pity someone who wrecked a relationship. In front of Susan, I unblocked Eric's number. The phone rang instantly. Lucy, you finally picked up. Eerily calm, I spoke. Eric, come take your pregnant girlfriend away from my office. The line on the other side went silent. Lucy, let me explain. I'm coming over. Susan defiantly said. Lucy, I'm pregnant with his baby. He'll choose me. Susan didn't realize Eric didn't care about the kid. I wasn't about to tell her that, either. While waiting for Eric, I didn't bother with Susan. Instead, I grabbed lunch at the cafeteria, then touched up in the restroom, creating a subtle crying look. I smiled at the fragile, teary-eyed woman in the mirror. With Eric, I've never been strong every moment, or refused to show weakness. Eric loved my independence and also when I acted cute. Lucy, I'm here. Where are you? I came out of the restroom and walked toward Eric waiting in the lobby, looking at him with a semblance of distress. As soon as Eric saw me, he rushed over and wrapped his arm around my shoulders. Lucy, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I didn't want his hug. Eric noticed my reluctance and dropped his arm, quietly looking at me. Let's talk outside. At the cafe, I looked at Eric calmly. Susan is pregnant. She caused a scene at work. Is she trying to throw mud on me? She claims I've intruded between you two. What do you say, Eric? It's not true. Eric didn't glance at Susan. That night was an accident. I never intended to be with her. Lucy, I was really looking forward to our wedding. You know that. Of course. I knew Eric was eager. He had planned every detail with such care. But how could I forgive him for choosing Susan over and over again? You cheated, Eric. Do you really not understand? Or do you just choose not to? Eric might have taken our 5 years for granted, figuring I wouldn't leave despite his indecisiveness. Susan, embodying his ideal type, was different, new, to Eric, and it sparked his interest. Do you admit you cheated? I asked softly. Eric seemed lost, likely recalling how I'd always spoken gently yet firmly during past arguments, telling him what was wrong. We always managed then, but not now. I admit, Eric choked out. I turned my head, my voice breaking. I understand Susan is your ideal type. You chose her over 5 years of us. So don't regret it later, or come back to me, alright? She's carrying your baby, Eric. You game over our relationship. Eric clumsily wiped my tears away, while I bit my lips red, watching his guilt grow. You cheated. I can never forgive you, Eric. I'm so hurt. Eric, pained, pulled me close. His grip was tight. I glanced at a glaring Susan and gave her a gentle smile. Playing the poor me card. I'm not above that. I won't forgive Eric, nor will I let Susan and Eric live peacefully together. I had initially thought I wouldn't get involved, but Susan brought this on herself. I pushed Eric away, eyeing him sorrowfully. You should leave. Eric looked like he wanted to pull me close again, but hesitated. He glanced at Susan, taking in her woeful face, before leading her out. Later, I noticed a friend request from Eric. Instead of declining, I accepted it. Nonetheless, I ignored his messages. Over dinner with Ken, I snapped a picture, making sure his hand was visible. Ken looked at me playfully. I waved my phone with a teasing smile. Mind if I borrow you again, Ken? His eyes met mine. Just borrow. Can't be for real. I paused and considered. Why not? With Eric gone, I was open to new possibilities. Depends on you, I answered. All right, Ken replied with a smile. Ken walked me to my door that night and handed me a bouquet made out of Lego bricks. Surprised, I took it. How did Ken know I was allergic to real flowers? I wondered. He waved as I headed inside, watching from the car. I sent Sue a message. If Eric asks about Ken, tell him he's just a pretend boyfriend I arranged. Eric sent me a flood of messages again. He said he had already sorted things out with Susan. Once she has the kid aborted, Eric would come to see me. Told me to eat well. When he saw my Twitter, he asked whose hand it was. I didn't reply. Susan texted me calling me shameless. I screenshot her message and sent it to Eric. He quickly demanded Susan apologize to me, indignantly. Shortly after, Susan was apologizing to me through a voice message from Eric. Listening to Eric's voice, I felt the restrained impatience he had towards Susan. A week later, Susan suddenly asked to meet up. Lucy, I've thought it through. I know I was wrong, and I'm leaving Eric. Before that, can I see you one last time? I immediately knew she was up to some trick, but I agreed anyway. I'm moving to New York for work in a week, so I wanted to see what Susan would pull before I left. We met at a cafe. Susan was carefully holding her belly, looking all fragile. Susan, what do you want to say to me? She smiled and tossed some photos from her bag onto the table. Sis, although I'm breaking up with Eric, he really likes me, you know. Your tactics are disgusting, making Eric ask me to abort the child. You think that'll bring him back to you? He enjoys being with me. The photos showed Eric being close to her. Looking at Eric's clothes, it seemed like it was the night they were together. It had been a month since. Why show me the photos now? I realized what she was after the next second. With gritted teeth, Susan slammed into the corner of the table, collapsing onto the floor in a mess. She was clutching her belly, face pale, yet wore a triumphant expression. Sis, if Eric finds out you killed his child, what do you think he'll do? I placed my phone on the table and quietly squatted beside Susan. Don't you know Eric doesn't like kids at all? Mid-sentence, I slapped her twice, hard, raising my voice a bit. Susan, why hit yourself? Quick, call an ambulance. I sounded tearful while speaking, and Susan glared at me with hatred. I personally called for the ambulance. Eric rushed over soon after, looking worried for me, but I pretended to be scared witless. Eric showed a pained expression. Susan was awake by the time she got to the hospital. Her eyes widened and quickly filled with tears. Eric, our baby is gone. Eric remained expressionless, making it awkward for Susan. Don't blame sis, it was my idea to meet her. I just didn't expect her to do that. Her face still bore my slap marks, but Eric was already losing patience. Pulling out his phone, playing our cafe conversation loud and clear. Susan froze. I had called Eric as soon as she asked me to meet. He heard everything she said. Now Susan really cried, heartbrokenly. But Eric just looked at her coldly. I'll cover your hospital expenses, but don't come to me again. I've thought a lot, and I don't like you. I only thought you were my dream type. It was an illusion. I only love Lucy. Eric took my hand, leading me out of the hospital and into the car. Lucy, can you give me another chance, please? I shook my head, telling Eric I already had a boyfriend. Eric looked at me desperately, holding my hand, pleading. Lucy, I know you're still upset. The boyfriend is just an excuse. It was my fault for making you angry. Please, try not to hate me. I agreed, and he nearly spun me around in joy, but I stopped him and sent him away. Even though I said that to Eric, I wasn't going to forgive him. I gave him hope for getting back together, but it was all a lie. During this time, Eric kept trying to win me over. He cooked for me, waited downstairs to pick me up from work, and bought me gifts, but I didn't accept any. I was with Ken. Eric firmly believed I was using Ken to avoid him, which made him even more determined. Until the night before I was leaving, I officially accepted Ken's confession. That night, we had some drinks. The driver dropped us off at the apartment building. After he left, I watched Ken button down a couple, lost in thought. I reached out, touching Ken's Adam's apple, and he held my waist, lifting me up against the car, Adam's apple bobbing. I held onto his neck and kissed his face. Ken turned his head, kissing me back. A loud noise erupted behind us, but I was too lost in the kiss to care, clinging to Ken. Only when Eric punched the car did Ken let me go. He stood in front of me protectively, staring intently at Eric. I was dazed, watching Eric's bleeding fist, his eyes reddening with rage. Lucy, did he force you? Ken chuckled coldly. Lucy is my girlfriend. Who are you, an ex-boyfriend? I steadied myself on Ken's arm and spoke calmly. Eric, why are you here? Didn't we break up? Eric looked like he could storm over and take me away. Lucy, isn't this guy just pretending to be your boyfriend? Why was he kissing you? I'm done with Susan. Lucy, can we get back together? Eric pleaded desperately with tears in his eyes. I took a step forward, Ken holding my wrist tightly. He had a hint of unease in his eyes. I comforted him with a kiss before looking at Eric, whose face was strained with tension, staring at me painfully. Ken was pretending before, but over time, I started liking him. Eric, I can't like someone who cheats. He trembled with urgency, explaining over and over. Lucy, I know I was wrong. I'm not dirty. Please forgive me. I really miss you. Whenever I lie in bed, all I think about is you. You can hit me or yell at me. Just don't leave me. I shook my head calmly. Eric thought I was sympathizing when I reached for his hand. But when I took off our wedding ring, Eric panicked, gripping my hand tightly. Ken gritted his teeth, prying Eric's fingers away, keeping him from touching me. I placed the wedding ring in Eric's pocket. Eric, we're really done. After that, I led Ken upstairs. Eric stood numb at the door, unwilling to leave. Ken spoke coldly, feeling sorry for him. I handed Ken a new set of pajamas, nudging him to take a shower. Ken, why are you jealous? At the bathroom door, Ken stared deeply at me, pinning me to the wall, kissing me for a long moment before heading to shower. I glanced out the window. Eric still hadn't left. Let him be. Ken came out without wearing a shirt. I shielded my eyes, accusing him of being cunning. Why aren't you wearing the clothes I gave you? Ken laughed. It's wet, uncomfortable. Watching his toned muscles, I was surprised. I thought Ken didn't work out much. He took my hand, placing it on his abs. I remember the way you looked at me last time. Lucy, who's better, me or Eric? You're the best. I blushed, pushed him away, and went to take a shower. That night, Ken hugged me to sleep, but nothing happened between us. The next day at noon, Ken and I boarded a plane together. He had already set up the house in New York. As soon as I turned on my phone, I saw a message from Eric. Lucy, you're not at the company. Where did you go? They said you quit. Lucy, I won't come looking for you. Can you come back? I told Eric about quitting. His chat bubble changed multiple times, but he didn't send another message. I put down my phone, changed clothes, and snuggled into the blankets. Ken got out of the shower and pinned me under him in bed. Is the bed soft? I nodded while looking at him. Ken's voice was husky. Wanna try it out? We spent the whole day messing around. Ken even fed me dinner in the evening. I glared at him, and he just laughed. 2 days later, we went back to work. I adapted well to the new place. We didn't work in the same location, and I thought it was nice to have some space. We didn't make our relationship public. One day, Ken was picking me up for dinner when we saw a junior colleague holding flowers, ready to confess to me. Ken hurried over, tossed the flowers aside, and looked worried. Lucy is allergic to pollen. You should step away. The junior, confused, listened and left. Ken looked relieved when he saw I was okay. The junior hadn't even gotten close. Ken nodded, but the next day he subtly announced our relationship. As soon as we got home, he couldn't wait to loosen his tie. After 6 months of steady dating, Ken proposed to me. That's when it occurred to me that I hadn't introduced him to my parents. So Ken and I took a flight back home that night. He was a bit nervous. Mom really liked Ken, but Dad kept a stern face as usual, though I was used to it. It wasn't that Dad didn't like Ken. He just didn't want to let me go. This time, I didn't stay alone, but stayed at home. Ken and I talked on the phone every night about our wedding. In April, I went out to try on wedding dresses. Ken had work, so I didn't ask him to come. He arranged a car for me, but while waiting for it, Eric grabbed my wrist and quietly said, "Lucy, can we talk?" I agreed. Actually, in the months I spent in New York, I saw him a few times. Whether it was after work with Ken, or during our dates, I had glimpsed Eric's figure, but I pretended not to see him. I didn't want to give him any more hope. Eric looked more worn out and mature. It seemed like it took him a lot of effort to say the words. "Lucy, you're getting married." He seemed at a loss, but had a serious look in his eyes. "Lucy, ever since we broke up, I still find myself missing you. It was only after you left that I understood my feelings and realized I made mistakes. I know you won't forgive me, but I wanted to tell you in person, Lucy, I've always been behind you." I casually smiled at him. "Thank you." My phone vibrated. It was Ken, sounding a bit anxious. "Lucy, where are you?" The driver said he couldn't find you. "I'll tell you when I get home. I'm getting in the car now." I waved politely at Eric and got into the car when I saw it. As the car passed by Eric, I noticed his red eyes. When I got home, it was completely dark. The curtains did a great job of blocking light. I felt my way along the walls to turn on the lights, and bumped into Ken's chest. I jolted at first, but relaxed once I felt his familiar embrace. "Ken, weren't you working? How come you're back? Today's our confession anniversary, Lucy." He turned on the lights, revealing a beautifully decorated space. I stepped closer and saw it was a picture from my freshman year. On the first day of college, I was looking for material for a photography contest, and you happened to walk into my frame. But I never got around to showing you the photo. He opened a love letter, which had his subtle confessions tucked inside books from those days. Seeing my reaction, Ken laughed. "You knew back then." I grinned and leaped into his arms, silencing his jealous words with a kiss. When we finished, it was already evening. I told him about Eric approaching me earlier. Ken rested his head on my shoulder and spoke softly. "Even if he regrets it, he doesn't have a chance. We're getting married." In July, Ken and I had our wedding. Looking at our intertwined hands, Ken hugged me tight. "Lucy, I love you."